Hey guys, welcome back to Cultivating Harmony. If you're new, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. So today I thought I would get a head start and start sharing some of those healthy, nourishing Chinese medicine eating secrets without breaking the bank. As food prices are rising, it's likely that they're going to continue to soar. I really wanted to share some of the wisdom that Chinese medicine has to get the most bang for our buck, but also, deeply nourish ourselves even in harder times. You don't have to spend a ton of money to actually get really nourishing food. I think that's kind of contrary to what we're led to believe today. So we will go ahead and start with number one. So the first bit of wisdom that Chinese medicine has, and was actually something that was really common knowledge back in the olden times, and not even necessarily in our super distant history. So it was always shared and told that the best way to actually extract the most nutrients from your food is by the cooking method of really slow, soupy stewing. Today we've kind of been led to believe that the most nutritious food and the food that has the most vitamins and all these types of things are those raw fruits and veggies, the colorful rainbow of fruits and veggies, green, especially uncooked. Now, I want to kind of put that out there as, it may only be a half truth, right? The thing about long stewed meats, especially with the bones, is that they're actually able to break down, and with that breakdown, it makes all the nutrients, and they're actually able to break down. And when they break down, they're actually able to really give up the essence of what they hold, as if it's vitamins or minerals or whatever, kind of concept that we have in the West. But this process also makes all these things so much more bioavailable to us, which means our body can actually use these. Unfortunately, we know in Chinese medicine that raw, undercooked food is actually a lot harder to digest. And when foods are really hard to digest, even if they have a high range of nutrient value, we're not actually able to absorb it. And all that matters is what you can use and not just what you're displacing. Like I said, this is actually something that almost everyone knew about. During times of war, soldiers were actually always instructed to purposely cook their portions of rations in soups or stews to maximize their rations. Talk about a lost history, right? Chinese medicine knows how important having good, strong digestion is. Really, the center of that is to have warm, cooked, and easily digestible food. So my second tip is to use cheaper, easily grown, or easily obtained starchy staples as the center of your plate. And then to use smaller amounts of the more expensive items to basically flavor or enhance it. So many starches like ancient wheats, barley, millet, quinoa, corn, sweet potatoes, yam, squash, plantains, and even new potatoes have been used for centuries in different cultures as a staple diet piece. Most places had one or two as the common denominator in almost all their meals throughout their day. In classical Chinese medicine terms, this was actually a very positive thing, as it meant there was able to be a greater stability within the blood. And blood actually also holds memory. So the body can actually learn to anticipate what is coming next. Also creates a continuity of time and ancestry within generations. With the staple starch, you're able to add in less meats and vegetables, which are generally, more sparse or expensive to obtain. You really can just add some different herbs and spices and you're ready to go. So tip number 3 is a pretty obvious one, and that is to grow what you can, so then you only have to buy what you cannot produce yourself. So it's pretty self-explanatory. If you can grow almost, everything that you can, then you're left with a smaller portion of food that you actually have to go out and purchase. It's a great way to save money, and I think it's an even greater way to, really cultivate our spirits and our physical bodies. Tip number 4 is do not let anything go to waste. There's so many great ways to go ahead and recycle or reuse things that you already have in order to give them a new life and get the most out of them that you can. This is something that has always been done when times have been harder, as people, get creative and adjust. Whether it's boiling down carcasses to make your own bone broth, soaking leftover crusty dried bread in a type of, egg and cinnamon mix to put in the oven for a, kind of a French toast bread pudding. Buying cheaper but also more nutritious organ meats A lot of times you get bulk, organ meats for a lot cheaper than most of the muscle meats. And the great thing about organ meats is you only actually need a small amount of these because they do have, so much nourishing aspect. And there's a lot of great ways you can actually incorporate these that, if you're a little more intimidated by the taste or approaching them, adding a quarter of a pound of ground up livers to 1 pound of ground beef and then mixing it all up, and you can't even taste it. And it's a really great way just to get that little extra boost if you need it and make things go a little bit further. There's also things that even if they go bad in our terms, right, such as sour milk, that you can actually go ahead and use. There's certain recipes, pancakes and breads, that you can actually use the soured milk in, so you don't have to just throw it out. All right, tip number 5, start looking up and writing down depression recipes today. Now, there's so many recipes from the Great Depression that are still archived online today that, they really used up the least amount of those more precious or expensive items such as, milk, eggs, butter. Great Depression, they really had to make use of everything that they had, and these items were, more expensive and hard to get. So making a really delicious cake or muffin recipe, right, was really hard to do, but mothers back then got really creative and were able to make these really great tasting recipes on very limited items. Whether it's a cake or muffins with no oil or butter or eggs. There's so many different things available online, and I really highly suggest just going ahead and picking a few that maybe you would make as your staples, if you needed to, and writing them down in case there's a time that we don't have access to these. Already having a few basic recipes written up, you're going to be able to reference those a lot quicker and with less stress. One of the stories that I heard often growing up with my grandparents growing up in the Great Depression was my grandma always used to share the story with us of having to eat everything that they had, whether or not they liked it. And the main thing that was always shared was having to eat the green part of the watermelon rind. Times were so tough that they couldn't just enjoy the pinkest, sweetest part. They really ate everything, and it's pretty cold in Chinese medicine to do, but it just kind of gives you another aspect to think about of having to eat everything or make use of everything. I know there's Great Depression recipes also that have to do with pickling the watermelon rind. So things like that, like I said, people just really got creative and kind of thought outside the box and were more flexible with recipes and ingredients. My grandmother's blueberry muffin recipe is actually one of the most simple recipes in terms of, eggs and oil and all that. But like I said, these items were more expensive and they were more scarce, and having, muffins, right, blueberry muffins, that's like a treat. Really, like if you were getting craving for something, you had to make do with what you had, even if it was a limited ingredient. Tip number 6 is composting. So taking those old eggshells, coffee grounds, ends to your fruits and veggies, banana peels, things like that. When you're able to add it back into the soil, it's just going to help you in the future years of when you're growing those, fruits and veggies, squashes, things like that, of replenishing what you took out. And it's going to save you a lot of money because you're going to maximize the nutrition from what you're growing each year. And it doesn't cost you anything because you're already, disposing of these items. So tip number 7 is to actually buy in bulk. So we know already that, you can get things for such a cheaper price by buying a 5, 10, 20 pound bag instead of getting, a half a pound or whatever. Often it's quite expensive, up front to do so. And so I really suggest that, go in on some of these more expensive bulk items with friends, with family, or your neighbors. A lot of times when you can pool your resources together, you're able to get a lot more. And it really just encourages, a more positive work together mindset, which I think is going to be really important in the future. All right, tip number 8. Try to make meals as casseroles, cakes, or empanadas, pierogies, things like that. The great thing about those types of meals is that you only need a little bit of everything to make a cohesive dish or a cohesive meal. If you only have a little bit of chicken or beef or fish, and you also have a little bit of some of that more starchy noodles, potatoes, or flour, you really just need a little bit of spices or herbs to kind of round it off, right? Some of the things that my family really likes to make and eat are any types of, kind of fish cakes or little meat cakes or pies, along with empanadas or pierogi type things where you have, the meat and the spices or the veggies, and then it's encased in some type of dough. These meals can actually be really satisfying, and you're really able to stretch everything out further. Tip number 9 is to have simple staples on hand, but spice them up. Really diversify them. And by doing this, I mean having something as simple as potatoes or rice, and being able to have these spices or herbs needed to make that savory, whether it's rosemary, thyme, garlic. But then you can actually turn rice or potatoes into something completely different by adding maybe some more of these spices that can lend themselves to sweetness, such as cinnamon, cardamom, even saffron. One of the great things that we know, or is fairly common, is rice pudding, right? We all know you can make rice in so many different savory dishes, but making a rice pudding is just an easy way to take something that you already have that can kind of go both ways. And the great thing about potatoes too, and I didn't know this probably until 5 years ago or so, is that the Amish actually make a candy from white and sweet potatoes. So either potato, doesn't matter what you have, they sweeten it and then kind of roll it into a very, sweet candy type of roll. And it's just something, kind of like taffy or whatever, right? It's a nice little treat. And another way to just really change something up. Since they're more bland, they're actually able to lend themselves to more creative combinations. Tip number 11, plan ahead. Now I find that planning ahead always helps me make the use of everything I have. Just deciding ahead of time what meals are you going to make that week and what order you're going to make them in really helps you to focus more on either reusing leftovers or incorporating ingredients that you have already prepared. It's an easy way to cut down on waste and save time. My final tip, number 12, is to get things on sale and preserve them while you can. Different things will go on sale when they're in their peak season, and that's when they're cheapest since they're so abundant. I just really encourage everyone, if you haven't tried drying or freezing or salting, canning, really, there's so many different ways of preserving that you can use to get things when they're the cheapest and have them more long term so you can enjoy them all throughout the year, even when, they're typically more expensive. I hope you guys found these 12 tips helpful. Let me know below if you have any other tips on eating really nourishing foods on a budget. Thanks, we'll see you guys next time.